Hello. In this video, I'm going to try build a sushi belt factory and launch the rocket. For those among us who don't know, a sushi belt is named after one of those Japanese restaurants where a conveyor belt has all the food on it. But in the Factorio world, it's when you decide to make an affront against the concept of order itself, load everything onto one belt, and just hope it doesn't jam. So I made a world, turned off biters because they won't add much to this challenge, and began. The most important part of any sushi belt is that the belt needs to complete a full loop, otherwise any excess materials will just clog it up at the end. So I put a few drills onto the oars, handcrafted all the stuff I need, and made a big loop that runs through some furnaces. Overproduction is really bad in this setup because the system has no use for ore after the furnaces, so any ore that makes it past the furnace corridor just takes up valuable space on the belt until it makes it back to the furnaces again. To combat this, I put a row of filter inserters at the furnace exit that will grab any ore and put it back onto an earlier portion of the belt. I then dropped a couple assemblers down in order to automate red and green science. But things just kept getting jammed, so I added in another row of furnaces to try and fix this. Make no mistake though, this factory is terrible. But it produces enough red and green science to get what I need: energy distribution, circuit networks, and steel furnaces. One of many issues with sushi belts is that you need to produce enough to get all materials to the assemblers. If you produce too much, the belt will clog. And if you don't produce enough, the wrong amounts of things get made and the belt will clog. And if you do everything perfectly, the belt might not clog, but it probably will. I got all the research I need, and this base kinda sucks, so I sucked it all up and started a new factory. The idea for how this one is going to work is simple. All the inputs together over here, wire up a couple belts to the arithmetic combinator to keep track of how much ore is in the system, and also link every inserter that will take raw inputs from the belts to another combinator which will then send a signal to subtract 1 from the total amount in the system, which will allow for more ore to be sent in as needed. The only downside to this system is that if something's taken off the belt by me or by an inserter that isn't wired properly, then it will be permanently unaccounted for and the count will be off, which could cause a lot of issues. But I'm sure that's never gonna happen. After everything goes through this field of furnaces, it feeds into an array of assemblers. With this inserter setup, things are taken from 2 belts but only deposited onto 1. So after a few things are made, they go through a balancer before going into another group of assemblers. I call these areas nodes. TM. I build one to make everything needed for the red and green science, complete the loop, and then I realize that when this thing is up and running, increasing the throughput is going to be nearly impossible. So before I start it up, I increase the amount of belts from 4 to 8. On each node I just add another row of assemblers, so the belt splits into 2 4-wide belts before and after each row of assemblers, with plenty of space to add more assemblers in the future. And of course I change each balancer to an 8-lane balancer at the end of each node. And finally I put down the node that makes science, and a couple labs after it, and completed the loop. There's just a couple things left to do before I turn this on. I add in a bunch of steam engines. I use this setup to get everything onto the belt without interrupting it too much. And I also upgraded all these stone furnaces to steel. Another thing before I turn everything on, I need to know how much of each thing the system currently needs. As it stands, we need 0 stone, so that's an easy one. We currently only need coal for the furnaces, so 8 lanes, 2 furnaces on each side, 17 in each column, and space for 5 coal in each furnace, we can deduce that we need 1,360 coal to keep everything fueled. Whereas for the copper and iron, I don't know. I don't even know how I would calculate it. So I'm just gonna guess. And with all that out of the way, now is the moment of truth. Let's see if this factory actually works. I send in the coal first to fuel up the furnaces, and then everything else. The combinator is sending in the right amounts, but a lot more stuff is getting through the system than I expected, probably because I forgot to put inserters into the labs. My bad. After that, anything that requires red and green science is completed pretty quickly, although you might notice a small issue arising. When the belt starts to clog, it means assemblers can't place things back onto the belt, which leads to even more clogs. So I turn off all the inputs, add a few more science assemblers, and manually clear out a lot of the stuff stuck on the belts. While doing this, I need to be sure to avoid all ore and coal I see, so as to not mess up the count. Remember, it only tracks the raw input, so I can grab everything else without upsetting the computer. With that under control, the next issue was the lack of iron plates making it far enough through, so I turned off a couple gear wheel assemblers. I also accidentally made a lot of steel, and there's currently no use for it, so I'm just gonna let it circulate forever until I need it. Next on the agenda, I need to make blue science. For that I need sulfur, plastic, and engines. So I need some oil. I found some pretty nearby and set up some rail tracks and some pump jacks. Back at base, I need to get the oil setup ready. I put some belts down and add a couple chemical plants. The belt is only too wide for these because there isn't space for multiple inserters without blocking the output. And to anyone in the comments saying to rotate the plants 90 degrees to solve this, yeah, you're right. Didn't think of that till I wrote the script. I put down another node just below the copper wire iron gear wheel node, and when it came back around I had to devise a way to run two 8-wide belts under each other, and I'm not putting how I did that on YouTube. Next I need the chemical plants to get water so they can produce sulfur. For this I just run a long pipe from a nearby water source straight to the plants. I hook them all up. Make a big node just for red circuits because it's not possible to play this game and not run low on those. I then add another node for the science, route the belt back up here, make another secret way for it to go under itself, and we're done. It's now time to turn the factory back on and reap the rewards. Only it's not working. Oh. Yeah, there's your problem. I didn't set these assemblers down here to actually do anything, so I fixed that. The belt is still jamming a little at the red circuits, but there's enough space in the belt that it will just work itself out eventually. In the meantime, things are actually all working for now, so it's time to sit back, relax, and let the science roll in.
Huh?
What? Out of coal? Come on. I don't want to shut down the entire factory because surprise surprise things are gonna clog. So I hand feed all the boilers while handcrafting some solar panels. I do this for about 15 minutes till I have a semi-respectable amount of solar panels, and now I can work on filling the input belts faster. I find an iron patch nearby and drop a few drills onto it. I set up a train, as well as a bunch more solar panels to keep up with the demand. Let me tell you, solar power is the future. Okay, renewable energy is a scam. Back to coal. With blue science automated, I just wait around until the rest of the research is done. The only research I really care about here are the robots and the electric furnaces. It was also around this point that I decided that this base kinda sucks, so I sucked it all up again and got to work on the ultimate sushi base. This base is gonna be perfect. It's gonna handle any amount of input, make millions of red circuits, have hundreds of science per minute, red belts, it's never gonna clog, It's just going to be a happy good time for everyone involved. The plan is to make the main belt not 10 wide, not 20 wide, not 50 wide, but 32 wide. For this, I'm going to need tens of thousands of red belts, so I set up some red belt automation. I also dropped down a few more boilers because this base is going to use a lot of power. While I wait for all those belts to get made, I set up a second iron train and a copper train. The copper train stop defaulted to Kim Jong-il, but I refused to have the name of such a horrible dictator in my game, so I changed it. Kim Il-sung. Much better. After about 3 hours, I think I have enough belts to get things started. So I make 32 separate input belts and get started on the actual main belt. The first part, of course, being the furnaces. Each furnace needs a filter inserter for the input so it grabs ore and doesn't just get jammed full of iron plates trying to make steel. They also need to be connected into one circuit that leads to the combinator, because if a single one isn't wired properly, it will make the count completely wrong. Not that that would ever happen, of course. I used the same setup as before to get everything onto the belt without interrupting the flow too much. Now it needs to all go into a balancer before it actually reaches the furnaces. And this is what a 32 belt balancer looks like. But for that, I need blue belts, which I don't have. But future me is the one who's going to worry about that. Current me is going to put down a few nodes, all rounded off with a balancer that I can't make yet. While I make the rest of the base, I hand feed some assemblers to make purple signs so I can actually get the blue belts I need. It completes, and I make another node for engines and place down a couple balancers. I thought about putting liquids onto the belt, then I thought about not putting liquids onto the belt, and that one just seemed way better. So liquids are going to stay in the pipes over here, in the incredibly long oil node. Then I make the red circuit. Then I make the red circuit node. Then I make the red circuit node. Now at this point, the belt needs to turn in order to get back and complete the loop. A small maneuver that would only cost a few thousand belts to move an incredibly short distance. Next node is for purple and blue science. And lastly, I make all the labs. This time I used a 4-wide belt setup. Didn't use it before. I don't know why. Almost done, but this place is going to use a lot of power. How much? Well, with 31 rows of 24 furnaces, we have 768 of them. Each one needs 186 kilowatts, meaning I need 142,848 kilowatts. Divide by 60 and we need 2,380 solar panels, or 158 steam engines. That's only for the furnaces. I didn't want to count the assemblers. I head over to my local patch of coal and set up a few drills, as well as a few more burners. Then I put down a bunch of engines, forgot I researched the better steam engines, and then placed down a few of the better steam engines. With all that done, I think it's ready for a test run. So I turn on all the belts, and it doesn't really work. Too much sulfur, too much steel, and some of the belts don't even line up. So I fix that, turn off some of the sulfur production, and make a few more furnaces with some speed modules to hopefully handle all of the input. Then I try it again. This time I didn't limit the amount coming in because I thought my supercharged furnaces could handle it. But the massively increased energy demand was too much, and they failed. So I made another massive power generator, and tried again. This time a lot of the furnaces couldn't place anything down onto the full belt, so I put a few of these things down, and tried yet again. And it all worked. I say worked. After an extremely short amount of time, the belt was completely saturated with copper wire, so I grabbed as much as I could hold to try and unclog the belt a little. There's also no iron plates getting through, so I turned off some of the gear wheel assemblers. Then it turned out this belt wasn't even working. Fixing it would require tearing up a lot of belts though, so I just put some splitters on it instead. It's good enough. Another issue is that this combinator isn't working. So I run a test, and it turns out this wasn't connected. So with that mystery solved, I can now actually run the base and try and make some progress. There's enough copper on the belt already, so I'm just going to put in iron for now. Red circuits aren't being made because there isn't enough plastic, so I add in a couple more chemical plants. To try and alleviate the overpopulation on the belt, I set up some boxes to grab stuff. This also saves me trying to grab stuff off the belt myself when I need it. I also try to just clear off some of the belt myself. What? I forgot what that sound was. I actually researched something. I didn't expect that at all. That one minor success is enough for me to trust this belt with my life, so it is surely fine to be left unsupervised for a while I go and make this coal train. Upon my return, these boxes are all full, and the belt is even more full than before, so I put down a lot more boxes. With all the science kind of automated, the next step is yellow science. For that I need blue circuits, flying robot frames, and low density structure. But the only new stuff I actually need is sulfuric acid for the batteries and blue circuits, as well as lubricant for the electric engines. So I turn a few chemical plants into sulfuric acid producers, and make a couple plants for batteries. Then a few chemical plants for lubricant. I cleared out a couple of these chests. The sheer volume of things on this belt is crazy, because taking out thousands of certain items has little to no noticeable effect on things. Instead of making a new node, I just changed a couple assemblers over at the red circuit node. Then I dropped a few new assemblers down to make blue circuits and flying robot frames. I connected pipes to the ones that need them, and then just added assemblers and changed the output of a few of them at the next node. It's not like we were ever going to overproduce purple science with this setup anyway. But right now the belt is full of random stuff. I have no idea what ratios of resources I need, what's being made and what's not being made. There's ore getting past the furnaces, so I'm just going to try and clear the belt out as best I can. I just put down a ton of boxes with inserters to try and grab everything. I do this on both sides of the belt, but due to the randomness of the balancers, it's possible for stuff to avoid the outer belts for hours, so it will never fully clear the belt, but I don't need it fully cleared anyway. While waiting for that to take effect, I placed down some more steam engines. I also turned off a lot of the assemblers that were overproducing things. And about an hour later, the belt was pretty empty. I now need the furnaces to be able to handle higher input. Making the purple science was already slow, so yellow would probably be even worse. It would probably get the materials after a while, but I don't trust this factory to function for more than 30 minutes at a time without completely destroying itself. I got to work on another furnace area because there's no room left at the original one. And I hooked up the belts in this beautiful manner here. Only I messed up the alignment of these belts. Rather than tear it all up and do it properly, I devised a clean, sleek way of connecting them up. I hooked up all the inserters into the circuit, headed back to the inputs, and tested it out. Not enough cables being made. Load back, turn on a few more cable assemblers, and go again. Okay, fine. More generators, more water, more boilers, more steam, more engines down here, some up here, and somehow power is still low. How could that happen? I made so many generators and they're all fueled, and I even made way more than I thought I would ever need. The new furnaces can't possibly be requiring that much power. I mean, I put down so many... These weren't ever connected. The coal here was just being used to power the coal drills. This area was just an infinite pollution generator. These solar panels also weren't even connected, but it's not like the power would have reached the base anyway. Who built this place? These engines weren't connected either, so I fix it all. Considering I've effectively gained about 200 steam engines, I think I probably have enough power to do whatever I want now. For the first time in a while, progress is actually being made. All that's left to do is to research everything needed for the rocket, and I can beat the game. So slowly but surely, all the research needed is completed. Now, for the final step. I build the silo, but to make the rocket I need rocket fuel, low density structure, and rocket control modules. We already make the low density structure and all the materials for the other two, so I just need to change a couple assemblers to make what I need. Now the rocket silo is big, 8 tiles wide to be exact, and with 4 sides, that gives 32 potential inputs, the same amount of belts on the main bus. I set this up so each of the 4 sides all have access to the belts, and reroute the main sushi belt to go through it. The progress bar slowly trickles up for a while, until eventually, it's completed. I could click this button and be finished, but we need something cool to send into space. And I know just the thing. The heart and soul of the base. The combinator that's been behind everything has earned a vacation. Way more than I have. Godspeed, Combinator. He's counting stars now. So, yeah, bye.